Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 82, Goofy Goblins. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the 2023 film, The Portable Door. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And what's new in your writing world?
New in writing world. Still working on edits, but I have started uploading the second story in the Tales of Zara series to Kindle Vella. So there's a few episodes up there now. By the time this podcast episode airs, I'll probably have at least 7 or 8 episodes up, I think. So if someone wants to read an early version of the story that will still undergo edits after, they can check that out there. Otherwise,
Awesome.
I'm still working on edits for the final.
Fantastic. Congratulations. That must feel really good to start being able to put those chapters up on Vella.
Yeah, it does. It feels like I'm making progress, at least.
Yeah. I yearn for that feeling because I have not been making progress on Meridian. You know, as we talked about before, my offspring has started higher education again. I'm Ubering, and I'm still kind of adapting to that change in the schedule. It actually chews up more of my energy and my time than I think I realize. I think, oh, I can handle an hour twice a day or whatever. But it's more than that. You know, it's the time to get ready to go. It's the time after you get back and the things that you need to do when you get back and then getting settled in. And so it actually chews up more time than I realized. So I'm still adapting to that, still focused on Meridian, but not quite as productive as I would like to be. But onward, I will get to it.
Yeah, you get back there. You got to get the groove going again.
Yeah, exactly, to see what the rhythm is. As a reminder to our listeners, you can read The Adventures of the Empyrean Guard, which is my space opera science fiction series, for which Meridian is the third book in that series. And that's available as it's being written in draft on Patreon. And Mike's series, The Tales of Zara, the first book is The Golden Scarab of Valahar. And that's available on Amazon, both in episodic format on Kindle Vella and as a paperback and ebook. And now you can also read chapters of the second book in this series, The Wrath of Sekhmet, and that is starting to be uploaded on Kindle Vella as an episodic story. So you can find all those on Amazon or Patreon, and those links are in the show notes. So what interesting stories have you come across lately in books, movies, or television?
Nothing over the last week. Just been focusing on writing.
Me too.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it pretty much for me, too. I watched the movie, The Portable Door, and still reading the Timothy Zahn Star Wars book. I think it's Dark Force Rising. I'm on that second book in that series. And yeah, that's about it. You know, it's been busy again since, school started again. And so I find myself running around doing a lot of other things and not really spending much time with entertainment. So, but I'm looking forward to getting back at it. I am seeing lots and lots of references to the Rings of Power, on Amazon, or I follow a few Tolkien YouTubers, and so I'm seeing lots of stuff there. So I just I'm looking forward to sitting down and watching that, and I'll have to figure out when that's going to happen, because I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really hopeful that the second season is a little bit more cohesive than the first season was, though I thought the first season was okay. I mean, I was willing to accept some of the changes that they made in the hopes that they would make sense down the road. So that's that hope speaking.
Yeah, interesting. Now, I haven't seen either of the seasons yet. I'm looking forward to watching it, discussing with you at some point.
I think
I'm
that's end of October, early November.
I'm not someone who really worries too much about the source material when
Yeah.
seeing an adaptation. I'm not tied to it. I guess if they adapt something and it's just horrible, then I feel like it's horrible regardless. But I'm willing to give a lot of flexibility to the storytellers in a different medium to see what they come up with.
Yeah.
So, and
Me
I'm not very familiar with the Silmarillion anyway, so I have no particular attachment to that at all. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to see what the story is just, on its own.
All right. Well,
How are you finding the Zahn Star Wars books? Because
oh,
I read
I'm liking
those,
it.
last millennium, so it's been a
Yeah.
while.
I enjoy it. It's an easy read. It's not complex, but then, Star Wars universe is not complex. As we talked
Yeah.
about in our Andor series review, Andor's the most complex that we've ever encountered in the Star Wars universe, as far as like layers of intrigue and mystery and storylines, etc. Star Wars itself is pretty straightforward, and then so are these
Yeah.
books. So it's a very good addition to that universe because it tracks that, and it's enjoyable. It's just a very enjoyable, entertaining read.
That's good to hear.
So are you ready to talk about The Portable Door?
Yeah, let's do it.
Today we're talking about the story told in the 2023 film The Portable Door, and I will read the short synopsis that comes up when you type in The Portable Door on Google. A man lands an internship at a mysterious London firm with unconventional employees, including the charismatic CEO, who is incorporating modern corporate strategy into ancient magical practices. Did you like this movie?
Yeah, I'm mixed on this movie. I'd say overall I'm positive, and we'll get to the things that I think could be improved. First of all, I want a portable door. That would be awesome. I'd be going to Hawaii and Switzerland and New Zealand and all kinds of places all the time. Yeah, so I watched this movie twice. I saw it, I think, earlier this year, and then I watched it again for this podcast. Kind of, admittedly, I skipped through it a bit to go quicker, but they do some things that I really like. I like the setup for the story, how they hit you with a mystery right from the start, or you're wondering what's going on with this character. Paul, I believe, is his name. How he's having all these coincidences. Obviously, something magical is going on. Just from the name and the art for it. But they do a great job of setting up this mystery of what he's getting into, and then when he goes into his interview, how he's as baffled as we are in that situation. It's another thing. It's another good example where they have the main character being as lost and confused as the reader is, right? So we're kind of introduced into the world through the protagonist, which is, as we have discussed many times before, is a very common technique when you're introducing a world that people aren't necessarily familiar with. Certainly if there's magic and rules that you don't understand, it's good to have the main character be a little, or at least have them, learn with the viewer what's going on. So I think they set that up pretty well in this movie. I thought it was very fun, a little, and quick, how they get him to the interview and go through the interview process. And it's very mysterious and quirky and fun. And there's a good promise of a setup there. And I like the idea that there's this organization that exists, kind of in this hidden world again. It's like we had talked about last week with Fablehaven, right? There's this magic in the world that most people don't know about. And they're using their magic to manipulate events, which is kind of cool, to set up seeming coincidences and things like that. Sometimes as hired guns, if not all the time as hired guns. It's a really cool concept. I like that. That's very fun. And I like how the main character progresses by the end of the story. He sort of starts off as this sad, kind of useless guy, at least in his own mind, to being someone who can step up and save the day. So I liked that. And I liked the weirdness and the quirkiness of the story, like with the goblins and the office supplies. I thought that was very unique and kind of fun. It's an unusual thing. I don't know if that comes from something else or if that was made up for this story, but I thought that was kind of cool. The reason I'm not sure is because there's apparently some mythology with goblins that I'm just not connected to. This was something we had talked about with the Doctor Who Christmas episode,
Yeah.
the last one.
Yeah.
Whereas like you were saying, oh, there's like this goblin mythology, maybe in the UK or something like that. And I kind of got that feeling here because in Doctor Who, it was like they were feeding off of coincidence, right? And then again here, it's like they were helping cause the coincidence. So I don't know if that's something that goes on with goblins, but I just noted that connection between the two. So
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I haven't looked into it, but it seems like there's something there. Yeah, there's a good setup for the story. I think they have some fun things. I think there's a nice sense of magic and wonder, like I spoke about again last week with Fablehaven. I think it has a lot of similarities to that, and also to Harry Potter, kind of this underworld of magic within the real world, with things that are going on and people with different abilities. And I like the setup. I think this is cool. I haven't read the book that this is based off of, or the series of books, I guess. So I can't compare it to that. I'm not, looking at it as, was this a good adaptation of that story or not, just on its own. So I would say generally I'm positive, though I do have a lot of things that I think could be improved with the story. What do you think?
I feel the same way, generally positive. And to follow up on what you said about, having a portable door, if I had a portable door, I think I would use it to visit family and friends that are far away. That's what I would do, I think. So,
Yeah,
and then also, some cool places.
Yeah, and take your offspring to school.
Yeah. Send my offspring to school. Go through the door.
You're right. Yeah, there you go.
So I agree. I found it to be an enjoyable watch. It feels very much like a story that is actually aimed for younger people, like kids. So it was very just relaxing and enjoyable because it was sort of creative and charming and engaging, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the characters. I thought each of the characters was really interesting, and I have to sit back and really evaluate this. They somehow managed to create unique characters with clear backstories, even though we didn't know what they were, pretty much from the get-go. And I was like, how did they do that? Rosie, I think her name is, the receptionist, right? Complex. As soon as you walk in, this is a complex person with backstory. You could just see the backstory. But you didn't know what it was. So like you said, lots of mystery and wondering what's going on. And I think that gave it so much depth. I think our protagonist was incredibly likable, though really needed to work on his house cleaning skills in his flat. Other than that, very likable, clearly down on his luck, and you kind of were rooting for him. You wanted to make sure he wasn't going to, be living on the street, be able to keep his really filthy flat. And the attention to detail was so much fun. Did you see all of like the billboards and the signs on the buses and stuff? Yeah, so much fun with the attention to detail. And like you, I have some things that I kind of wish were done differently to make the story even more engaging. Would I watch it again? Yeah, I think so. This is one of those stories where I think I would put it on the background while I was doing something that didn't require a lot of focus, as just something fun and entertaining with me while I was working on something else. And would I share it with like a young kid? Sure, I would do that. I think it's a fun little story for a kid because kids are not going to be quite as eager for answers to questions as I am. And I think therein lays some of the things that were frustrating for me about the story. So if you're ready, we can talk about those.
Sure. I just had to follow up on some notes. I agree with you. I think you're right. It's like, this is not a super deep movie. You can just kind of throw it on and enjoy the fun and quirkiness of it and the characters. And I agree with the receptionist. It's interesting that you pointed her out in particular, because I was thinking as I was watching, like, That actress did such a good job. Like you said, from the moment she's introduced, and she's not really introduced, she's just like there, you get a sense of like, oh, this is a real person here, right? Like this is a person with a personality. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the character really shined through, even though it's just a small character, almost a background character in a way. You really get a sense that, oh, this is a living person. So yeah, I agree with that. I thought that was really good.
Oh, and I do want to add, I did also find that Doctor Who connection that you did. And I also had little, it was a very Doctor Who-ish feel to it. And I think it was because that protagonist, Paul, was so ordinary, like so many of the companions that we meet when we first meet them. They're just very ordinary people. And I got the same kind of
Yeah,
feeling. Ordinary people who are encountering something extraordinary, and then how do they
yeah,
react to it? Which is sort
yeah,
of
and
the
kind of
same
in
thing
over
that
their
you frequently
head.
see. Yeah. So I got that feeling, which was a nice feeling.
Yeah,
So, that was also sort of comfortable and familiar. So let's talk about the things that we might change as a writer.
yeah. I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on this. Um, I have some thoughts. I don't think I quite nailed what I'm looking to find, but I sort of generally, for me, there was something just a little bit off about this movie, and I'll go through some of the things I noted and see if you have something else. Maybe part of it was it went maybe a bit too far out of its way to be quirky and mysterious, and then had to essentially do exposition dumps to explain things rather than letting them be discovered naturally through the story. For example, one of the things, there didn't really seem to be much of a reason not to tell the interns what was going on earlier. It felt like a cheap way to like carry this mystery on, longer than it needed to be. And if they had explained later that it was part of testing them, or they didn't want to reveal too much in case, the interns didn't work out or something like that, could have made sense. That would have been an easy thing to put in there. As it was, it just felt like one of those writerly things, like, oh, we just want to make it mysterious for longer rather than there being a reason for it. So that was one thing I felt. One sort of at a high level, and this is maybe more of an editing thing than a writing thing, I would have trimmed a lot of this throughout the story. Some of the scenes and sequences felt unnecessarily drawn out. One example, like when they're doing the montage of Paul and Sophie, I think was her name, visiting different locations. I was just fast forwarding through that. This watch through was like, I get it. I feel like you could have them go to 2 or 3 locations and then have one where they sit down and talk. But otherwise, it just felt like too much. And it wasn't like super long. It was just, that was indicative of that feeling for me through a lot of the story. It was like, this scene is just a little bit too long. Like when he first goes there and he's sitting at the desk and they're just kind of staring at each other, not doing anything. It's like, why is nothing happening on the screen right now? So I felt like it was kind of like that way throughout, or at least for the first 2-3 acts. And then there's some other weird things, like when he goes for his interview, right? And he sees a map on the wall that apparently no one else knew about. It didn't really go anywhere. It's like nobody investigated that. And how would he have seen it without using his magic? I didn't really get that. It didn't seem like it was anything other than, oh, we're trying to show that there's something special about him. But then that wasn't really his ability. Like he couldn't just see things without using his little hand trick or whatever. So I don't know, weird things like that didn't quite feel right after the fact when I looked at it. Like in the moment, I was just like, oh, that's cool. He sees something they don't see. But then when I thought back about it, it didn't make sense with his character and where they went with the story. A big one for me, Sophie came across as a real jerk. So it made it super hard to root for her and to root for them as a couple. I just didn't buy that at all. If we're talking about how to improve it, I would have just made her more quirky or shy or maybe a little standoffish rather than just straight up rude and self-absorbed, which is how she came across to me. I think that ruined a lot of it for me. And I think just fixing that one thing would have made me far more invested in the characters moving forward. And then at the end, I wanted this Paul to stand up for himself and be defiant and have this like strong moment at the end, but he just kind of remained passive throughout the whole movie. And it, you're kind of rooting for him, but then it's like he comes through at the end, but again, it's very passive. He's not really directly confronting anyone. He just kind of opens a door. So I wanted to see something more active and defiant from him in that climactic moment. And then also in that climactic moment, he creates a door. When he's creating this door, he sees all of these other doors, which is weird because that concept has never been introduced up until this point. And then he just chose one. Like, why were there those doors? Why did he choose this one? And then, I mean, this is just a really dumb nitpicky thing, but why did he fall into it instead of just walking through the door? I didn't understand that. And then another thing was I forget the name. Wells, is that their name? I forget. The father who was locked away in the void land. He had his 12-year-old son sign over his soul because he was like, oh, the son is evil. But we never really saw the son being evil, did we? It's just like the father just like makes that claim. Are we not sure? Like maybe the father actually turned his son into this evil person by taking his soul from him. He made him rebel against him. So I was a little unsure about the messaging there, but we'll get into theme and stuff later. Anyway, there's just a lot of little things that felt off to me. These are some of them, but I really want to hear what you think and what you would improve.
Oh, I agree 100%. And for me, the whole thing was an issue of pacing. As we were introduced to Paul and introduced to this situation where he stumbles into a job interview, it took so long. I had to remind myself that this was actually a movie because I was thinking, is this a television series? Because honestly, as I looked back on it, this should have been a television series, not a movie. There's a lot of detail here and a lot of really interesting mystery that they stretched out that would have been perfect for a 6 or 8 episode series.
Now that you're mentioning it, I agree completely. This had the same feeling to me that watching Marvel's Eternals had, or I had watching Marvel's Eternals. I came out of that movie, and you're right with this one too. We're thinking this movie was either far too long or it should have been stretched into a TV series because they tried to cram too much in, and by trying to put so much into it, it ended up dragging the story out and not being as focused as it could have been. Okay, that's all. Yeah. Handing it back off to you.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think this would have been better served if they were going to approach it the way that this was approached. And let me be clear. I loved the amount of detail we got about his life and the stain on his pants and the broken shoelaces and all the things that happened to him and all that. I thought that was fun. It was really fun to get immersed into this man's life so that we understood him, so that we were really with him when he took this journey. I didn't think that was a problem at all. What happened, however, is for a movie, then they're trying to cram everything else into the last act of the movie. And then what happened, which goes back to what you were talking about, there were so many questions that were left unanswered about what the heck was going on. We opened this movie with, who is it? Humphrey Wells trapping his father in what they called the Nether. And he said, as he's closing the door, whoever closes the door controls the door, right? And so we had right at the very beginning of the movie a rule about this magical world. And that was almost the last rule we ever got.
Right.
I would have loved to have known, what are the parameters here? What are they able to do? What are they not able to do? To help us understand. And it really then gives a framework for our hero as he's moving forward, to know that he's taking the rules, using the rules, and functioning within the rules and still succeeding because he's smart, he's clever, he's talented, whatever. The next thing that I was very confused as is, what is his talent? Apparently it's vibrations and seeing through walls. They defined Sophie clearly. She's a seer.
Yeah.
She can read people's minds. She can talk to people telepathically. I think she was looking into that woman's mind as she was reading the book. So that's how she could tell when she'd gotten to the certain page on the story. We had a clear understanding of what her job was. We got to see the Countess, I guess. Like, effect some kind of telekinesis by pushing that guy into the fountain. So we had some clear understanding of what people's skills were in this organization. But we never got an explanation as to what Paul's was and how he was suddenly able to magically create doors. So I was disappointed that I didn't get more details from that. Like you said, what was going on with the dad, other than, this kid wanting to take over the company so he could make more money, I guess? Have more power, control? It's just sort of all very nebulous. And I think had this been spread out over 6 or 8 episodes of a television series, we could have dug into what happened as a kid that made him evil and his dad take his soul. What were his goals in taking over the company and trying to apply magic to corporate strategy? I mean, what was all of the underlying stuff? Why was Sophie such an unpleasant person? Because I agree with you 100%. At the end, when they're holding hands, I'm thinking, this is not believable because why does he like her? She was not a nice person until things moved on. And then they started going through the door together, and then there started to be some connection. But even that, despite all the places that they went together, it was unclear how the connection was taking place, other than sharing these traveling experiences. So, yeah, I think if this had been spread out more, we could have dug into all these little things and had those questions answered.
Yeah, those are all great points. I think, too, for me, I really enjoyed the start of this movie. I thought they had a great setup and really hooked me with sort of the coincidences that he was going through and the sort of the quirky magic. And then they introduced this thing of, we're controlling events behind the scenes, we hooked up these two people, we'll see, maybe they'll fall in love and get married. There's an interesting thing there. And then has really nothing to do with the movie. It's that's not the point of the movie. That's not the focus. And it went into this other thing of, like you said, Humphrey is trying to what? Just get more money for this group? I mean, certainly they could have gotten as much money as they wanted to with the abilities they have at their disposal, if that was really their goal, is to get more power. To what end? It seemed like he was getting the power, offering the power to these other business people, but what did he get out of it? Yeah, it was very nebulous. I didn't really understand that. And then there's something that seems like a plot hole, but maybe you can correct me here. So Humphrey was able to control Sophie, right? Because she signed this form essentially giving him control of her soul, right? And by putting that signed document into the dead bank, he got control over her. But how did they put it into the dead bank if they needed the portable door to get into the dead bank and he didn't have the portable door?
Boy. That's me falling through the plot hole. Did they need the portable door to get into the dead bank? Because the goblins were already there.
But weren't they using the door? Because he had the door at that point, right? Or maybe they had some. But that's what I was wondering.
He lost
But if they could already get through the door, then what did he really care about it? I mean, yeah, the portable door is cool, but he certainly didn't need it. If that's the case.
And then he said he lost it, but how did he lose it? That was another question. How did he lose it? Why did he lose it?
That's another thing.
Yeah. So, that sounds like you're right. I missed that plot hole. But you're right. That's also confusing. See, needed to be longer.
Yeah. Anyway, a lot of questions. I feel like there's a very cool setup to the story. A lot of quirky, fun things. And like I said, overall, I'm on the positive side. Not hugely on the positive side, but I am on the positive side because I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's more for kids probably. But yeah, there are a lot of unanswered questions. It loses a lot of focus. I think there's a lot of things that maybe aren't as defined as well as they could have been. And yeah, it probably should have been a TV show.
So did you divine any themes? And yes, I used divine purposely.
I think there's at least a couple of messages here, depending on, the viewpoint you're looking at it from. If I look at it from the protagonist's POV, the theme I get is basically Star Wars, which is if you believe in yourself, you can overcome seemingly impossible odds, right? You have this guy who has this newfound power that he's playing with over the course of the story, and then he has to believe in himself at the end that he can use it at the climactic moment to save the day. I mean, that's like exactly what Star Wars does, and not just Star Wars. There's a lot of movies and stories that have that as a theme, which is a good theme. So that's kind of the broad one if I'm looking at the protagonist POV. But I think there's another theme if you're looking at it from the antagonist point of view. Humphrey, right? You have something like power corrupts, or maybe in this case, more specifically, trying to control others or take away their will ultimately leads to one's downfall. Something like that.
It's like the island, right? If you enslave people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Yes, exactly. I think it's a similar kind of thing. And there's probably more going on there as well, but those are the two big ones that I got. What did you see in there?
I got the same thing you did, just, having confidence in oneself as the theme, mostly focusing on Paul. So, yeah, I didn't really think too much about Humphrey because, honestly, I didn't have enough information about Humphrey to really understand what his journey was. So I stuck with Paul, but I like what you said about Humphrey.
I didn't really understand his motivation.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just throw out a line like, "Oh, my son was evil," and like have that explain things. Like that's
right.
That's not how writing works.
Did he have the mark of the beast on the back of his neck? I mean,
right. Yeah, what's going on here? Like if we had seen him do something evil when he was like 12, like, oh, he's killing birds and kicking cats and, something. He's trying to take people's minds over. If like we saw this and the father like...
I think would have been good. Like he was like influenced by a dark great wizard or something. Some bad magic happened to him to make him evil.
Yeah, something.
And that way, if he's like killing birds and kicking cats, I'm not immediately looking at dad going, well, what did you do wrong?
Right. Yeah. So I think maybe there's some more in the book version of this. I don't know.
So what are your takeaways from The Portable Door?
Man, I don't know. I think there's a lot here. I think on the positive side, I think enjoy the quirkiness, right? Have fun. Have fun with mysteries and setting up strange things. I think that's good stuff. It's fun to read. It's fun to watch. But on the other side of that, make sure that you're paying that off, right? Make sure that you're delivering on the promise that you're setting up at the beginning and that the story evolves naturally.
Yeah. Well, mine is about that pacing, like you
that's a big one.
mentioned. It's about that pacing. Because, I write short stories, 5,000 word stories. I write novellas, which are about 20,000 words. And I write novels, which are around, 75 to 80,000 words as of right now. And there's a certain pacing that goes with those different lengths, how much information you're going to give, how you set up your storyline, how you're going to move things forward. Now, am I saying I'm an expert? No. But this is definitely something that I think is important to be aware of as you are looking at the duration of whatever the media for the story is, to make sure that pacing moves the story along appropriately for the length of that medium.
Oh, yeah, that's a great note. I think that ties into one of the things I was feeling was a little off about this movie was remembering sort of the spine of your story, right? Like you should be able to describe your story in one sentence of like, here's what this story is, here's what this is about. Here's the character, here's their goal, here's the complications and obstacles that they face. Here's the antagonist that's working against them. You should be able to define that one sentence and that be the spine of your story that carries through. And it feels like that got muddled in this one.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in the 2023 film, The Portable Door. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters and all our subscribers. We're so grateful for your support and your encouragement. The Stories Told podcast is available on multiple podcast platforms, and we thank you for liking and subscribing or following, depending on where you're listening. It may not be a big deal to you, but it means a lot to us. If you have a favorite book, movie, or TV series you'd like to suggest for the podcast, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, and that link is in the show notes. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com, and those links are also in the show notes. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in the movie Wish. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. I'm looking forward to next week as well.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.